What will Jedd Fisch do with the coaching staff?
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back in to another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Lars, we got a really fun show coming at all day everydayers today. We're going to get into some NFL talk. We're going to talk about the top pro dog performances from 2024. I'm very excited about that because there are a couple that I really want to dive into. We're talking about what position group we are the most confident in going into 2025. I'm sure we're going to have some different opinions there, so we'll get there. But one thing that you and I really wanted to make sure we talked about, we got a lot of questions on this subject, is will Jedd Fisch add another position coach? For anybody who was unaware, the NCAA recently did away with the limit of you can only have 10 on-field assistant coaches, outside of quality control, all that sort of stuff. So the question is, we've seen, a lot about Jedd Fisch giving up play calling. That's not going to happen. We're going to say that right now, right off the bat. But with right now, the way this offseason has gone, Washington's as a net loss for coaches. We've seen two go out, Vinny Sunseri and Steve Belichick, and one come in Ryan Walters. So, Lars, the question is, do you hire another coach? If so, where?
Well, so the obvious answer is, the first answer is yes. You have to hire another position coach, whether it's just a literal straight-up recruiter that has the title of, I don't know, special teams coordinator or outside linebacker coach or whatever kind of, go hire just a mercenary on the recruiting show. I don't necessarily think that's going to be the path that Jedd goes. I do think he wants, again, somebody with some recruiting chops, because if you look at the other guy you lost, Walters replaces Belichick.
Yep.
And then now you're looking for the replacement for Vinny in that kind of mental math. Vinny was a good recruiter, certainly did his job as a safeties coach, but I don't necessarily think he was like an all world, like, hey, I'm going to go off, recruit anybody on defense or kind of be the key recruiting guy. So you could look at it from that perspective. If you get a younger guy who's maybe just a position coach, or, which I think both of us are more inclined to do, you go and get a specific special teams coordinator and let that guy be your recruiter and kind of just let him handle whatever he needs to handle. Because and to be clear about this when I say this, I think you don't take Pow away from tight ends, because that's just his bread and butter. Because I don't think he should just focus solely on special teams and then you go hire a tight end coordinator. I don't think that's the path, but it is worth bringing up. Hey, this the only other path there. So I think, to be clear, you're going and getting a special teams coordinator, and I've mentioned a couple of them. Right? There's one that I know that's in college football right now that used to work for the Patriots that has some ties to Jedd. Name escapes me off the top of my head, but there's enough young guys, I think, in Jedd's Rolodex where he can look and say, you know what? We need to fix special teams. We already have some plans for it, and I also need a younger guy maybe to just be a recruiter as well, and I think that might be the happy medium solution here.
So I like where you're going with that, where it's, it gives somebody a nice title. It's a pay raise for people who are just looking to come over now. We've seen the willingness to invest in the coaching staff from the university, which is great. You love to see that, especially with, what we've seen Ryan Walters getting, where it's a pay raise over what Belichick got. So I say that just to say, hey, yeah, the willingness to do that is there, where the special teams coordinator might not always be the biggest sell for somebody just, I'm going to come in and do that. I also want to coach a position group or whatever. And you also just haven't had the ability to do that in the past with certain limitations on the coaching staff. But on top of that, I look at this and I say, because the other two positions where you might see a coach come in would be safeties or on the edge, just outside linebackers in Ryan Walters' scheme. And I want to bring up the name Drew Wilkins, because that's the only other name we'd really heard attached to the defensive coordinator job in any capacity, who was an outside linebackers coach with the Baltimore Ravens, with the New York Giants, and with the New England Patriots. So he's got a long history just at the position, which would be just a really interesting name, because just with the way this scheme is going to work, if you want to have somebody in that mold come in to take something off of Jason Kafusi's plate, and just say, hey, we want you to work with the interior guys and just really hone in on that. And we'll bring in somebody else to help you out and just really hone the pass rushers, where we saw the level of play decrease as the season wore on because of injuries and because of a couple other things as the level of competition continued to increase as well. So bringing in somebody else, because I think Jason Kaufusi did a solid job, especially with the interior guys. We saw, especially Javon Parker, we saw him improve in leaps and bounds before he got hurt. We've seen Logan Sakapolu improve. We saw Sebastian Valdez improve. So I think leaving him with the interior guys might be helpful, and bringing in somebody else for that edge outside linebacker just position is going to be what you need most going forward, because at the secondary spot is something you and I talked about before we pressed record. We might not see that. It's still worth mentioning because Vinny Sunseri held the title, but with John Richardson, you might not need that.
Yeah, well, it's also worth remembering Alex McLaughlin and CJ Christian both came on their transfer recruiting visits and only met with John Richardson. That is worth laying out. And what CJ told me, whereas he described it as Richardson's the overall, the head coach of the defensive backs, if you will. And so to me, why not just kick Jay Rich over and say, you know what, Walters can also help with the secondary if you need, an assistance during practice, but in title only is Jay Rich. And I think that might also be a better sell. Think about how Jimmy Lake started out. I know it's a sensitive name, just got fired, not coming. Sure. By the way, another name, not coming back to Motley. Cool. Glad I got that very quick. But the reason why I bring Jimmy Lake up is he started out as a defensive backs coach, not a safeties coach, not a cornerbacks coach. I'm personally not a fan of dividing up things in terms of, oh, hey, we're going to have one, edge coach, one D-line coach. Now, I do think that's the only appropriate position, or linebacker, kind of inside, outside linebacker, where it's like, okay, in the front seven, you can kind of tweak some things. I think in the secondary, you want cohesion. We saw Jimmy Lake thrive under that. Where did we see him lose it? And no offense to Will Harris, when Will Harris became that the assistant secondary coach and the secondary coach, and it kind of seemed like, wait, okay, it's one handling cornerbacks and because there was Terrence,
Terrence Brown.
Terrence Brown, yeah. And so Terrence was cornerbacks coach and Will was safeties coach. Like, no. Like, it worked last year, and Vinny and John did a good job. But I would rather have John Richardson as my overarching DB coach and let Bala, Kaufusi, Wilkins, one of whoever figure that out. And I think the reason why I like Wilkins so much, and here's another thing that you can consider with this. You can add a co-special teams title with him, because the one thing about special teams and being a special teams coordinator is there are still multiple coaches involved. Scotty Graham is involved. There are GAs involved. So it's not like it's just Jordan Powell kicking it in the end zone and saying, all right, let's run the punt team. All right, let's run the, kickoff team. It's like, there's multiple coaches helping out. That's why it's a coordinator. It's a coordinator role. You're still taking advice from a bunch of different coaches. So in that respect, I think he could also maybe add a co-special teams title, and just that way Powell doesn't lose anything, but you're like, hey, look, Powell, you got two positions. Maybe let's give him somebody to help you. So that way it doesn't look bad on Powell. Because, again, the one thing that I think is worth considering here is when we talked to Jordan Powell, and I don't know if it was in the spring or the fall, but I'm going to bet it was in the spring when he said it. Because the way he said it was, Jedd's given him a new voice that Chris Peterson never did. So basically, like, Jedd's empowered Powell to, be the kind of person he is, grow in the kind of person he is. So in that same vein, there's no way the Jets can say, hey, you know what, we're just going to make you just tight end coordinator. We're going to take the entire title away from you. It's like, no, I want to empower you. I want to get better. Maybe it was the players. Maybe it was the ski. Whatever it was, you can run it back in 25. And then if you have another bad special teams year, then you hit reset and, do whatever you need to do. But I think Powell has certainly earned it to where it's like, no, keep everything. Just maybe add an assistant to it. Because as you mentioned with the numbers, you can do that now.
Absolutely. And that's the most important thing about this is we've seen Jedd explore every avenue possible for improvement, whether it be on the roster, on the coaching staff. And this is going to be just something to watch, where we're not saying this like, hey, we're hearing this guy might get hired. We're hearing that guy might get hired. Make sure you subscribe, because when those things happen, we will have those here on Locked On Huskies. But right now, we're not hearing that. Right now, we're saying this is an avenue that Jedd Fisch needs to absolutely explore, because he's done a really good job of finding different ways to take advantage of the situation he's been put in terms of hiring coaches, in terms of bringing in players to the roster, in terms of the way he's holding roster competition this spring. Like, in terms of all of those different things, he's taking advantage of the world of modern college football. And this is another one if he wants to go out and continue to add guys to his staff. And Lars, we've talked about the coaches. Now let's get into some of these players. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms, then waiting and wondering and worrying if you're going to get any money back. Now, Taxes is easily uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who's matched to your unique tax situation. An expert who's backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy. While they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on their progress, and you get the most money back guaranteed, all while you go about your day. No stressing, no worrying, no waiting. Now, this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available TurboTax Live, full service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. So, Lars, when you look at this 2025 roster, as it stands right now, what position group would you say you're most confident in where, let's say we get to the end of 2025 season and Washington's, wherever they are in the Big Ten. We're not going to say record or anything like that, but just say if we're hearing Big Ten Network, whoever it might be, talking about saying, yeah, Washington has the best at X position group.
It's a good question because, there's a lot of unknown. There's a lot of, talent coming back, but can it pop? And I think if there's going to be, I would say the way I'll phrase it is the one that I think is in position to pop the most is wide receiver. When you look at Denzel Boston coming back, again, we're going to ride that Denzel train one more time. Just FYI for all the everydayers and people that are new today listening to this podcast. When it comes to about March or April, the full Denzel train is going to be all systems go. So just FYI there. But the reason why I think it's receiver is because you still have now Jonte Cook, a healthy Kevin Green, Audric Harris, Marcus Harris. There's so much young talent.
Yeah.
And potentially, as I wrote yesterday, I want to say this again, Dylan Robinson. I think that somehow, some way, dude finds – I'm not saying he's going to be a permanent receiver, but I think there's no way that Jedd does not get that guy a couple of snaps and see, let's just see what happens. We got numbers. Let's see what happens here. That's with 61.95. But with that being said, I think I would put that position group at least, when you think about with DeMond and everything else, you could say a couple others, but I would probably go receiver number one.
So I like where you're headed, but I was on the other side of the ball here, where for me, it's the cornerbacks. It's not just the cornerbacks. It's the secondary as a whole. And a lot of that is because of the addition of Tacario Davis, where we talked about what that looks like. If Thaddeus Dixon comes back and gets involved with that, we see him on Twitter. Yeah, that's a very, very large if, where we see him very against playing the nickel when you talk about what he's posting on Twitter, all that sort of stuff. But even without Thad, this is a really, really strong group that I'm very excited about going into next season because this coaching staff has some great talent, Dylan Robinson being, the number one in terms of high school additions, but there's a lot of guys on this roster that I really, really like. And whether that be guys that didn't play a lot last year for one reason or another, or the transfers coming in. Because let's start with the guys on the roster, where I look at guys like Leroy Bryant and Rashawn Clark as the top two right now, as guys that can take a major step forward next season, because I think they're going to be right there battling with Dyson McCutcheon for that role in the nickel. And, Rashawn is a guy who we've heard Giles Jackson talk about him, as you mentioned Dylan Robinson, as somebody who might play on both sides of the ball. That's what Giles Jackson said. Hey, watch out for Rashawn Clark in that very same role. And just to make sure we get everybody in here, Leroy Bryant, same thing, where we saw him start in the Sun Bowl. We've seen him play snaps at the position and just showed the coaching staff that the coaching staff said, this is somebody we really enjoy just having around and having in a whole bunch of different spots. So we want to find a way to get him on the field. And on top of that, there's Alex McLaughlin. There's CJ Christian, the two transfer safeties you mentioned a few minutes ago. And both of those guys are players that have the production numbers that you're looking for. And in a system where you're going to see a lot of defensive backs on the field, whether it be a pass or a run, having guys like CJ Christian and Alex McLaughlin who are more than willing to come downhill and play the run and play in the box and play close to the line of scrimmage, play anywhere along the defense, having those guys is going to be a lot of fun. And I say all that to round it off by saying, having Tacario Davis as your CB1, you might not find a better cornerback in the country this coming season. So I feel like it's a bit of a layup to say, yeah, I'm really confident in the secondary, but I say that because there's so much to like about this group.
No, and in a way, they almost have equal questions where you can line up 3 starting receivers and 3 starting cornerbacks and say, okay, Tacario versus Denzel. Okay, there's your A1 matchup.
Sure.
Prysock and Cook, 2 guys got to prove it next year. Like, I love Pricelock. Don't get me wrong. Great length, great size, and all that, but did not have a great season. Just call a spade a spade. Jonte hasn't done much at Texas in consideration to what, Tacario and everybody else in Denzel have done in their respective rooms. And then you look at the slot with Kevin Green or Audric or whoever. I'm just going to say those are the two leading candidates for me. Maybe Rashid. Throw Rashid as a compliment in there as well. Versus Leroy, Rashawn, or Dyson. Dyson's the leader in terms of reps in that room, which would be, I guess, Kevin Green. And so you kind of look at they're staggered about the same, which is why the next position for me is probably going to be the antithesis of what a defensive position would be in the same right, which is running back. I think the fact that if there's, and again, we're kind of going to work through, you might see which trajectory I'm going with, but Adam Muhammad, Jonah Coleman, Jordan Washington now getting a redshirt freshman. He's going to play probably, if healthy, all 12 plus games next season. I would not be surprised if he's on the Adam Muhammad train. Just knowing that Adam came in earlier, Jordan I know transferred. I think he was a spring transfer-ish.
Yeah, he came in after spring practice. Yeah, that's right.
Exactly. So even though he was a freshman in Arizona, he did not really practice in spring. So I think that was why I know one of our bold predictions was he would take back a kick return for a touchdown. That'll probably happen next year. So I'd just say kick all of our predictions about Robinson or Washington down to next year. But I think when you look at that position, you got Quade Carr, you got, I'm curious which other running backs will emerge in that room, but I think those three right off the bat, like with, the quarterback number 2, like there's so many possibilities that you can have with that running back room.
So I had running back second also on my list, and it's because of everything you just said. It's having Jonah Coleman, who, if Tacario Davis is going to have an argument to be CB1 in the country, I feel like Jonah is going to have a similar argument, with Jade Knott being my top 2, because I just love watching that kid play down at Cal, as the number 1 running back in the country. Because there is some serious top end talent on this roster coming back for next season. It might not look that way right now, but as the season, as the off season kind of comes around, we get into spring practice, we get over the summer, people are going to start looking at this roster. People are going to start filling out their 2026 NFL draft boards, and they're going to say, hey, I really like this guy from Washington. I really like that guy from Washington. I can guarantee you that. I'm not going to make a whole ton of bold predictions over the course of the next few months, but that's one where you're going to see Denzel Boston and Jonah Coleman and Tacario Davis at the very worst, top 5 at their respective positions on 2026 NFL draft boards. So I say I want to just circle this back around to running back, because Jonah, having that guy in the room already is special enough, and that's great. But having somebody like Adam Muhammad, who showed off the burst, the wiggle, all those different little things that you want to see from a running back, the ability to hold up in pass protection as an 18-year-old in the Big Ten, the fact that he did all those things, this dude has a very, very bright future ahead of him. So I put all those things together, and, whether it be, as you said, Lars, whoever emerges, I would certainly bet it be Jordan Washington. Just having a player like that, man, that's so much fun. Like, look at some of he got, I think, 3 touches this season. Mm-hmm. But you look at the way some of them are designed, and the way that it's just, we want to get this kid and his speed into space as quickly as we possibly can. And I love it. It's beautiful. It's perfect. It's going to work very, very well in the right scenario. So moving forward, just having a guy like that as your RB3, who is a change of pace, who you can line up out wide, who you can do so many different things with, and it's still going to say, yeah, that's a running back. But that's just, like, I feel like the term gadget player can be very demeaning to a player, but I mean it with the utmost respect because of his skill set. Like, he is the true definition of what a gadget player could be, because you can line him up out wide in the slot. You can line him up in the backfield just to find different ways to take advantage of his truly elite speed.
Yeah, it's like Darren Sproles. It's like a bunch of other scat back. And I think scat back equally kind of has a similar, like, oh, you're not a running back, you're a scat back. You're a piece of, you're kind of light away. It's like, no, I think, certainly Adam Muhammad doesn't fall into the category. Jordan Washington might, but I don't think that's more or less just because of the reps that he's had. But I think we should probably kind of round this whole thing out with a solid minute of DeBron, because this whole thing doesn't. This whole thing, and again, shout out to Senior for that, because again, this whole thing doesn't go if DeMond doesn't go. And the one thing that's, and I again is, you know what this reminds me of? Michael Penix the last 2 years, whenever they go, oh, look, wow, Michael Penix, look, it's crazy. It's like, bro, we've been saying this for the past 2 years at Washington. Like, right. We've been saying this is gonna happen, it's gonna work. And you look at DeMond, and all I hear is DJ Lagway, and Garrett Nussmeier, and
Arch Manning,
and Arch Manning. And I get it, right? I get it. But especially the DJ one, where it's like, they're both in the same situation. They're both in a 6-6 program this year. Basically, who are you betting on between the two? I would take DeMond. I know it's a crazy situation, and that's not a slight to DJ think he's a bad player. I just don't think DeMond got the credit that he truly deserved, and he's going to show why next year.
So I have a question for you, because I agree with you in all of those regards, but what would you say is the number one reason that you're confident in him? Just like if you could only pick one.
His maturity. He's
okay.
mature beyond his years. Didn't have happy feet. He did have happy feet maybe half a dozen times this year, and in terms of all 12 games, like there was a couple plays in the Sun Bowl, a couple plays against Oregon where he could have bailed early. But in terms of decision making, maturity, processing, understanding, he's the perfect Jedd quarterback.
Oh, absolutely. So mine is somewhat along that lines in terms of the maturity. It's the accuracy. It's not just the fact that, hey, this kid has dynamic athleticism, can change the game with his speed, with his legs. And it's not just he's got the ability to push the ball downfield and he's got the elite arm talent that you're looking for. It's as a true freshman in his second career game, he completed 81% of his passes. Like, this is a kid with all world upside. We've said it before. We're going to say it again. And now with the full offseason to work as the starter and gain chemistry with all these guys, there's nowhere to go but up. And Lars, I feel that Trent McDuffie was snubbed from first team All-Pro, which we'll get to right after a message from our good friends over at Game Time. Attending the new 12-team college football playoff games is an incredible experience that brings fans together like never before. I remember the excitement of past playoff games and can't wait to make new memories with the updated format and extra teams involved. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite events even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets, which is great news for me as baseball season is starting to come up. I can't wait to just go spend way too much time at just many baseball stadiums around the country. That's just a peek into my summer plans there. And browsing through the deals with Game Time Picks is such a breeze. And I found great value for all kinds of seats around the venue. The Super Deal in particular, it stood out as the best value for the event. I love that I could see the seat views before buying and that the app shows the total cost up front with no surprise fees to checkout. Plus the on-time ticket delivery and lowest price guarantee gave me complete peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Lars, seeing Trent McDuffie make second team All-Pro was awesome, but I'm hard pressed to find any corner in the league that has played, because we really do need to spend a couple of minutes talking about giving a couple of shout outs to guys that you and I are both, that we know very well and absolutely deserve it, because we know that, some of our everydayers don't necessarily enjoy the NFL, which, hey, we get. Not everybody is a fan of the pro game for one reason or another. It is what it is. I personally can't get enough of it. That's just because I'm a nerd and that's what I do. And for anybody who might not have been keeping up, Trent McDuffie has been absolutely stellar this season. He has already had arguably the best start to like any corner's career that you possibly can. He's won 2 Super Bowl rings through his first two seasons. First team All-Pro last year. And then he follows it up with a second team All-Pro this year, along, with the Chiefs being the 1 seed, all that sort of stuff. And forces the first 2 interceptions of his career. Finally gets on the board with that. Plus forces a fumble in the following week, following his 2 interceptions. So he forces 3 turnovers in 3 weeks. Has a career high 13 pass breakups. And he didn't even get selected for the Pro Bowl. Like, that's its own insane thing. But this is a guy who I want to make sure that we shout him out among these top just NFL performances from the season, because he's somebody who in a couple of months, as Jedd continues to push his NFL selling point, I believe that Trent McDuffie is going to sign the largest deal ever given out to a cornerback when he gets a contract extension. And
he'll deserve every penny of it. Let's be clear about that, because Trent, I think that's what's funny about Trent is he makes first team All-Pro without any picks. And then has 2 this season, finally gets his first career interception. And it's like, no, you're second team. And it's just like, bro did not dip this season. Like, not
at all.
Like, he did not dip in the slightest.
There was one statistical dip, and it was because he forced 6 fumbles last year, and he only forced 1 this year. Like, that's not really a stat that's replicable.
Exactly. It's not one where it's like, hey, you gave up 200 yards last year, you gave up 500 this year. Okay,
sure.
You've probably been picked on a little bit more, but again, still not giving up anything. And I guarantee a lot of that is due to Chiefs, just general people just being just exhausted of the Chiefs and not wanting to, give, 20 different, Chiefs players all pro or something like that. Because at some point, I get it. And that is one thing that's worth noting, because I think all pro is voted on by what, the coaches and players, right? Is that, if I'm not mistaken
no,
by
it's
that?
voted by the press.
Oh, well, okay. Well, it's half your answer.
Yeah, it's the AP list. But I think one more thing though, just on top of that, he's done it against the best players in the league while working against the Jamar Chases and the Nico Collinses of the world. Like, he's playing against the very peak of competition, just like somebody else who, Lars, one of your favorite guys that we've spoken to over the last few seasons, who went viral for a fantastic moment with Myles Garrett last week. That's Roger Rosengarten. And I think he was absolutely the inspiration of the segment today, because not only has he had to face and did a phenomenal job against 6-time All-Pro TJ Watt at multiple points in the season, he shut him out for the second time in his career. TJ Watt did not record a single stat while working against Roger Rosengarten. By the way, he did that in the playoffs. Like, that's just the level that Roger has played at this season. And oh yeah, you're wearing a Ravens thing. That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to Roger. He has been just out of this world this entire year as somebody who took over week 3, week 4, and just hasn't looked back and has blocked his way for maybe a third MVP for Lamar Jackson. Derrick Henry has been tremendous all year long. And a lot of because Roger Rosengarten has completely changed this Baltimore Ravens offensive line.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll take you back to 21, 22, somewhere in that ballpark. Tyler Columbus, I'm sure you recognize the name, played for the Seahawks, had a cup of coffee with some other teams, coached Roger Rosengarten in high school at Valley Christian. And we were talking in 2021 before he had ever started the game at Washington. He's a Sunday player. He can play on either side of the line, left or right. And I said, hey, that was the kind of our discussion of, hey, should he come back for another year and play left? Should he go back and play right? This is why Roger Rosengarten had no business coming back to Washington for another season, because he already can play right. He can play left if he needed to. But he locked down that right, like right when he got drafted, I knew the Ravens just got their right tackle. They just got their starting right tackle and won the job in fall camp. Was a starter all season. And here's the one thing that I looked up. I did a story on this on Athlon Sports going into the Ravens Steelers playoff game. Roger allowed 4 sacks, or three sacks between week 1 and 8. Allowed 1 sack and 14 pressure the rest of the back half of the season. So it was like, hey, look, it took a little bit to get acclimated, which again is understandable, especially, just naturally at the position. He didn't struggle, let me be clear. But again, 3 sacks in 8 games, not great. But then having won the rest of the season, and then twice against Myles Garrett and TJ Watt.
And TJ Watt, yeah.
It's like those are 2 names where it's like, hey, he's got great stats. It's like, right, against me and you. Like that's right. When he's asked to block us, it's not that big of a deal. But yeah, Roger's a guy where I would not be surprised if when he's a guaranteed second contract guy. Maybe because tied over to left after I know their left tackle is getting a little bit older, but I would that could be a move in a couple of years. But yeah, Roger was a guy that right away when I knew he got drafted by the Ravens, I'm like, yeah, there could not be a better fit. And shout out to Lamar for giving him some kind of kudos on social media before the game, and that's what kind of led me to the story. It's like, oh, Lamar giving him a shout out, Lamar giving him clean.
So, couple honorable mentions I want to throw in here. 1, Rome Odunze. Any fantasy football player, that's the only person that you're going to hear talk about Rome Odunze being underwhelming this year. For what that Chicago offense was this year, he was excellent. 700 something yards, 3 touchdowns. Rome is going to make a big leap forward in year 2, especially if they hire the right head coach and fix that offensive line. Very excited about what his future is going to be. Budda Baker finished 2nd in the NFL in tackles. For anybody who might not have seen that, Budda Baker, his 4th All-Pro season, finished 2nd in the league in tackles behind Colts linebacker Zaire Franklin. But Lars, I'm going to hand the floor over to you because somebody who you have a very good relationship with and somebody who just absolutely blew up in the back half of the season is Jalen McMillan. He's been nothing short of spectacular.
What's great about that is right when you said blew up in the second half of the season, you didn't have to say Jalen's name. Like I already knew.
No, I didn't.
It was one of those things where Jalen kind of got the rough end of the stick, where everybody was talking about Rome, and we all knew that Jalen Polk ended up being the 2nd round pick. But it was one of those where it's like had McMillan not got hurt last season, he would have gone before Polk. And I'm willing to not die on that hill completely. And that's no slight to Jalen Polk. But, got to be careful here.
The numbers would have looked very different, yeah.
And with that being said, I think Baker's the perfect quarterback for a guy like Jalen, where he's working in the slot, perfect situation for him. And, yeah, I mean, Jalen was a guy where I forgot who said it. I don't know if it was if it was Peterson or if it was Junior Adams. But when he came to Washington, he had the entire route tree known. Like he already had he just had to refine it. And I think that's why I was always so high on Jalen. It was like, look, this is a guy where he doesn't, have the most physical, impressive stature. Again, it's not a slight. That's just, you look at Jalen, you don't think, wow, big physical receiver that's going to go get a lot of yards and a lot of touchdowns. But he knows how to get open. And that's exactly what he did the back half of the season. Every time you're looking up, it's like, yeah, Mike Evans this, so-and-so that. It's like, who's the release valve in the slot? It's Jalen McMillan, and it's really not close. And I think Jalen could end up being one of the better slot guys in the NFL over the next couple of seasons because of that, and because of as long as Baker's his quarterback, I think Baker knows how to find him better than anybody.
Absolutely, and Liam Cohen's did a great job with that offense. He's got two tremendous just guys to learn from in Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. Like you really couldn't have asked for him to go to a better situation, which is great. Obviously, he's got former teammates all around him with Kate Otten being there, Devin Kolb. It's great. He just really couldn't have been put in a better situation. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all everydayers tuning in. Before we get out of here, I do want to take a quick couple of seconds to say thank you to everybody who's reached out and offered their condolences surrounding my grandma. I know a couple people have said, hey, you need to take some time off for the podcast. Feel free to do so. One of the reasons we decided to just keep going, keep pushing through is my grandma was the number one supporter of this show. She, as things started to deteriorate, she would always tell me that she loved tuning in to make sure that she was able to hear my voice, which just meant the world to me. And she was just always the number one person to say, hey, continue following your dreams. She gave me a place to live when I needed it. It's actually around the time that Lars and I met was when that happened. And she's somebody who has been very crucial to just the development of the show and the development of me and us and everything that Lars and I have been trying to build and following our dreams. A lot of that has been thanks to her support. So I just want to say, Grandma, I love you. I thank you for all this. And truly thank you to everyone who's tuned in, subscribed, because that is what made her the proudest. Just seeing everything that this has become. And I truly can't even put it into more words than that. And with that being said, please everything. I'm not going to say it that way. I'm just going to leave all of this in here. But yeah, if you enjoy the content, everything we have to offer, please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating the channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us 5-star reviews. It does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Tuesday.